I
No,
stood
this can't
frozen,
be
my heart
happening.
racing. No, no, this can't be happening, I whispered to myself. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My father's hand came down, slapping my mother's face with such force that the room seemed to shudder. The sound of it, the slap, echoed in the silent courtroom. I watched my mom flinch, her eyes wide with disbelief as my father leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "You're nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." The words hit harder than the slap. My mom didn't say a word, but I saw her eyes fill with tears. Her face, pale and broken, haunted me. The woman I had known to be strong, the woman who had always protected me, was now crumpled in front of me, helpless. I could feel the anger building inside me, a burning sensation in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to her, to shield her from his cruelty, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. Why would he do this? I thought, my mind racing. How could he say that to her? How could he say that to us? My father turned his back as if the whole incident was beneath him. "I'll handle this," he said coldly to the judge, as if what just happened was nothing more than a small nuisance. The courtroom was silent. But I wasn't silent inside. Inside I was screaming. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout. "How dare you? How dare you treat her like this?" But all I could do was watch as my mother, the woman who had always been there for me, stood there, her eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't comprehend. "Why, Dad? Why?" I muttered under my breath. "Why can't you ever see me?" I had spent my entire life trying to gain his approval, trying to prove that I wasn't just his daughter. But this was beyond anything I had ever imagined. And in that moment I made a decision. I wouldn't let this moment define me. I wouldn't let his words break me. If he wanted me to be nothing, I would show him that I was everything. And I would do it without his approval. I didn't need it. The courtroom felt like a distant memory as I sat at the small table in my apartment, staring out the window. The rain was coming down in sheets, tapping against the glass like a constant reminder of the storm I had just walked through. "Mom," I whispered, looking down at my hands, "why did he do it?" It had been years of trying, of pushing myself to be someone worthy of his approval, and yet, it never seemed to matter. I thought about my childhood, the countless hours spent trying to prove I could be more than just the daughter of a man with unreachable expectations. I remembered the first time I joined the military. I was 17, just a girl eager to show that I could be strong, that I could be brave. And for a long time, that was the only way I knew how to gain my father's respect. "You're not built for this," he had told me when I first mentioned it. "This is a man's world, and you're just a girl playing at something you'll never understand." But I didn't listen. I couldn't. The thought of him thinking I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of being part of something so much bigger than myself, was unbearable. So I joined. "I'll show him," I said to myself every day. "I'll show him I'm worth more than he ever believed." Years went by, and each success, each promotion, every award felt like a step closer to proving that I wasn't just the daughter he had dismissed. But each time I came home, medal after medal draped across my chest, he would look at me, and his eyes would gloss over as if he didn't see me at all. "Nice job, I guess," he'd say, and that was it. I would leave his office, head held high, but inside my heart would break. I had fought, bled, and sacrificed, but for him it was never enough. And as the years passed, it became clear to me, I wasn't just fighting for respect anymore. I was fighting for something else. "He's not the one who defines me," I told myself in the quiet of my room, after yet another rejection of my worth. "I define me." But that day in the courtroom, when I saw him slap my mother, when I saw him tear her down with a single word, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her. It was about everything I had ever fought for, and how much I had let him tear us both down for his own ego. "Enough," I said quietly to myself. "I'll never let him do this again. Not to me and not to her." The fire inside me ignited again, stronger this time. But this time I knew I didn't need his approval. This time I would prove that I was not his nothing. I was everything. And it wasn't for him. It was for me. It wasn't long before the next confrontation came. But this time it wasn't in the courtroom. It wasn't in front of a crowd. It was just him and me, alone in the same room, and the silence between us was deafening. I walked into his office, my hands shaking slightly but my resolve strong. I had just been promoted. Finally, after everything, every battle, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, I had earned a place among the top. And this wasn't just a promotion. This was a recognition of my worth, not just as his daughter, but as a woman who had fought for her place in a world that had never given her a fair shot. "Dad, I did it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I placed the promotion letter in front of him. I'm officially leading a team. I earned this. He didn't even look up from his paperwork. His eyes stayed fixed on the papers in front of him. For a moment I thought he hadn't even heard me. Nice, he muttered, his voice lacking any real emotion. But you're still just my daughter. His words cut through me sharper than I expected. The years of fighting for his approval, of showing him I was capable, all seemed to mean nothing in that moment. Is that all it is to you? I asked, my voice trembling. Is that all I will ever be to you? Your daughter? He finally looked at me, his gaze cold and calculating. Titles don't mean anything. You've done nothing to prove your worth. It's just a piece of paper. His words hit harder than any slap could. I had done everything to prove myself, but it would never be enough. I had spent years chasing his approval, believing that somehow, if I could just show him I was good enough, everything would be different. But now it was clear to me it was never about me. It was about him. His pride. His ego. Everything I've done, I said, fighting back tears, I've done for you, and yet it's never enough. You don't see me, do you? You don't see what I've sacrificed. What I've fought for. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. I don't need to see it. You'll always be my daughter. And that's all you'll ever be. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words sank in. I felt something inside me snap. The resentment, the pain, the years of waiting for his approval, all of it came rushing to the surface. And for the first time I didn't feel like I needed him. Fine, I said, my voice trembling with controlled anger. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need anything from you. I turned and walked out of the room, the door slamming shut behind me. But this time I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like I was missing something. I felt something else, something powerful. I felt free. It wasn't long after that I was given the assignment that would define everything. The operation. The one that would show not just me but the whole world what I was capable of. This was my moment to finally stand tall and prove that I was no longer just the daughter of a man who couldn't see me. Are you ready for this? My commanding officer asked as I gathered my gear. Ready as I'll ever be, I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. This mission wasn't just about success. It was about everything I had fought for, everything I had overcome. This was my redemption. As the operation unfolded, I found myself in the thick of it. Danger was all around us, but I didn't hesitate. I led my team with precision and calm, guiding them through every twist and turn of the mission. Each decision I made was calculated, driven by the strength I had gained through years of adversity. In those moments, I wasn't thinking about my father, or the years of trying to win his approval. I wasn't thinking about the pain he had caused me or the rejection I had faced. I was thinking about one thing: success. We have to make it to that building, I said, my voice cutting through the radio, calm but firm. Move out. As we reached the objective, the mission's success seemed inevitable. Everything we had trained for, everything we had fought for, was falling into place. But there was still one more challenge ahead. Stay sharp, I ordered, my voice unwavering. We breached the final location, the enemy closing in, and my heart raced, but my mind stayed clear. Every movement was deliberate. Every step counted. Then it happened. The final push. The key decision that would determine the mission's outcome. With one swift move, I signaled my team to execute the plan. It worked. The mission was a success. We stood there, in the middle of the battlefield, knowing we had done it. But for me, this wasn't just about the victory. It was about something deeper. It was about showing myself that I was capable. I had done it without needing anyone's validation. I had done it for me. Good job, team, I said, my voice steady, but there was a hint of satisfaction in it. We had won. But as I stood there, looking at the team that had followed my lead, I realized that the victory wasn't just mine. It was for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough, who had been dismissed, who had been pushed down. This victory was proof that we could all rise. It wasn't until that moment, standing there in the quiet aftermath of the mission, that I realized what I had truly gained. It wasn't just success. It was freedom. The freedom to stand tall, to know my worth, and to no longer seek approval from anyone. But there was still one thing I had to do. I took a deep breath, looking at the horizon ahead of me, and said quietly to myself, "This is for me. No one else." The days after the mission were filled with briefings, accolades, and congratulations from everyone, except him. My father's face wasn't in the crowd, and I didn't expect it to be. I didn't need him to see what I had done anymore. I had already seen it. I had already proved it to myself. But still, there was a part of me that wondered. Would he ever acknowledge me? Would he ever see me for who I really was? Weeks passed and I found myself standing in front of the same courtroom that had witnessed the worst moment of my life. This time, however, it wasn't for betrayal. It wasn't for rejection. It was for recognition. The military had decided to honor those who had participated in the operation, those who had led their teams to victory. I wasn't just part of the group, I was being singled out. For the first time, my efforts were being acknowledged. But more than that, I realized something profound. I no longer cared if he was there or not. I no longer cared if anyone acknowledged me. I had earned my place. I had earned my respect. I walked into the ceremony hall, and as soon as I stepped onto the stage I saw him. My father. Sitting there in the front row. His eyes locked with mine. And for a brief moment there was a flicker. A flash of recognition that I had never seen before. "Here you go," the officer said as he handed me the medal. "You've earned this." I took it in my hand, feeling its weight, but not as a symbol of what I had achieved for anyone else. This was for me. This was my journey, my victory. I turned to face the audience, and as I looked around, I didn't need to hear the applause. I didn't need to see my father's face filled with pride. I was proud of myself. And that was enough. When I walked down the stairs after the ceremony, something strange happened. For the first time, my father stood up. "I see you," he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. It wasn't much. It wasn't a declaration of love or approval. But it was something. And that something was all I needed. I had already moved past needing his recognition. What I had achieved, what I had become, was for me. But the fact that he finally saw it, even in the smallest way, brought a sense of peace I hadn't expected. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel resentment. I felt free. "I don't need this," I whispered to myself as I walked out of the hall. "I've already won." And that was it. I had found peace. True peace. Not in the approval of others, but in the acceptance of who I had become. A woman who no longer needed anyone to tell her she was enough. I was enough. The days after the ceremony were quieter. The noise of the accolades, the attention, all faded into the background as I settled back into my routine. But there was one thing that stayed with me, a sense of peace that I had never experienced before. A peace that came from within, not from anything external. I stood in front of the mirror one morning, examining the woman who stared back at me. Her face was familiar, but there was something different about her now. The strength in her eyes, the quiet confidence in her stance. It wasn't the same girl who had walked into the military with something to prove. "Who are you now?" I whispered to myself. "I'm me," I answered quietly, almost in disbelief. The journey I had taken wasn't just about the promotion, the mission, or the recognition. It wasn't even about proving myself to my father. It had been about something deeper, something far more important. It had been about discovering my own worth. About understanding that I didn't need anyone to define me. I sat down at my desk, looking through the photographs scattered on top. There was one of me and my mother, taken years ago before everything changed. I could still see the hope in my eyes, the belief that maybe, just maybe, I could make everything right. I had spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to be what I thought others wanted me to be. But now, looking at the photo, I realized something. I had been perfect just the way I was. "I don't need anyone's approval," I murmured to myself. "Not his. Not anyone's. I'm enough." And just like that, everything fell into place. The anger, the resentment, the years of trying to make myself someone I wasn't, all of it was gone. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. Not to him. Not to anyone. I had done it all for myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest achievement of all. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything I had fought for, everything I had overcome, lift off my shoulders. The past no longer had a hold on me. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below, a peaceful smile on my face. I had come so far. And for the first time in my life I felt free. I stood there, alone in my apartment, looking at the medals hanging on the wall. Each one represented something different. Different battles, different victories. But now they no longer felt like just awards. They felt like symbols of my journey, of my strength. They weren't just reminders of my achievements. They were the physical proof that I had fought for everything I had. I ran my fingers over one of the medals, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a symbol of my transformation, of everything I had overcome. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of the girl who had stepped into the military as a scared young woman, unsure of herself, unsure of what she could do. But now, as I stood there, I saw a woman who had earned her place, not because of anyone else, but because of who she had become. I smiled to myself, the realization settling in. "This is who I am," I whispered. "This is me." It wasn't just the uniform or the medals. It wasn't just the promotions or the success. It was the person I had become in the process. The woman who had stopped seeking validation from others. The woman who had finally realized that her worth wasn't defined by anyone but herself. As I walked through my apartment, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was someone I could finally recognize. Strong, confident, and free. "You're not defined by your past," I said aloud, my voice firm. "You're defined by who you choose to be now." For so long, I had let my father's rejection, his coldness, define me. I had believed that his approval was the key to my worth. But now I understood something more profound. My identity wasn't something I had to earn from anyone else. It was something I had to claim for myself. And with that, everything changed. The chains that had bound me for so long, those invisible chains of expectation, of rejection, had fallen away. I was finally free to be who I was meant to be. Not just his daughter. Not just someone's soldier. But me. The woman who had fought for her place, who had earned her own respect, and who finally saw her own value. And in that moment, I understood something I had never truly grasped before. Identity is not something you inherit. It's something you create. I sat quietly on the edge of my bed, the soft hum of the city outside filling the silence in my room. The quiet had become a comforting companion to me in these last few months. After everything, the battles, the betrayals, the triumphs, I had finally found something I hadn't known I was searching for: peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from external achievements or from winning anyone's approval. It was a peace that came from within, a peace that said, "You've done enough. You are enough." I looked around my room at the pictures on the wall, the medals on the shelf, the letters and documents that chronicled my journey. Everything seemed to hold a story, a moment that had brought me to this point. But none of it felt like it defined me anymore. It was all part of a past that had shaped me, but it wasn't who I was now. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the skyline. The world seemed so much bigger now. My father's approval, the constant chase for recognition. It all seemed so small compared to what I had found. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. "This is it," I whispered to myself. "This is what it feels like to be free." I hadn't realized how much of me had been chained to my past, to the idea that I needed validation from others to feel whole. But now, standing here in this moment, I realized I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need to be anyone's idea of perfect. I was perfect because I had found my own worth. I had fought for it. And I had earned it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running towards something. I wasn't chasing after a goal that I thought would fill the emptiness. Instead, I was standing still, in complete acceptance of who I had become. And that felt like the greatest victory of all. "Dad," I whispered as if he could hear me, "you were wrong. I don't need your approval anymore. I'm enough." I closed my eyes and smiled. The battle wasn't about proving anything to him. It wasn't about getting revenge or making him see me. It was about finding peace within myself, and that peace was mine regardless of anything he had ever said or done. And with that, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The past no longer had a hold on me. I was free. It had been a few months since the ceremony, a few months since everything changed. But still, I found myself in moments of quiet reflection. Moments where I looked back on everything I had been through, and I realized just how far I had come. How much strength I had built, not just from the victories but from the losses, the rejections, and the betrayals. One morning, I woke up early before the sun had fully risen. I sat by the window, my fingers tracing the outline of my favorite medal. It wasn't just about the battle I had won. It wasn't just about the mission or the operation. It was the reminder of how I had fought for myself. How I had risen from everything that tried to break me. I stood up and walked to the mirror. There she was, the woman I had become. I still didn't recognize her sometimes. But I could see the difference now. The quiet strength in her eyes. The confidence in her stance. She wasn't waiting for someone to tell her she was enough. She already knew. "Who are you now?" I asked the reflection, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm me," I answered quietly, smiling to myself. "I've always been me." It wasn't just the uniform. It wasn't just the medals or the accomplishments. It was the fact that I had found peace within myself. I had found the strength to let go of the validation I thought I needed from my father. From anyone. And in doing that, I had become something more than I ever imagined. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about understanding that the only approval I needed was my own. And that realization was more powerful than any victory. As I walked through my apartment, I felt a sense of power. Not from the external, but from the internal strength I had discovered. I had fought for myself, and that fight had made me who I was. "You're strong," I whispered to myself. "You're enough." And in that moment, I knew it was true. It was late in the evening when the call came. I had just finished a long day of training and was finally unwinding, letting the exhaustion take over. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence of the room. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was important. I answered, my voice still heavy from the day's work. "Hello? Is this protagonist's name?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes, this is her," I replied. It was a familiar voice, one I had heard many times, but it hadn't spoken to me in a long time. My father's voice. "I've been thinking," he began, his words slow, measured. "About everything. About what happened. I know I can't change the past, but I see you now. I see what you've become. And I want you to know. I'm proud of you." I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in. I had spent so many years waiting for this moment, waiting for him to see me, to acknowledge me. And here it was, in the most unexpected way. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. But then I found my voice. "I appreciate that," I said, my tone steady. "But I'm not doing this for you anymore. I'm doing this for me. I've always been doing this for me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could feel the distance between us, the years of silence, the years of rejection. But there was also something else. Something new. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was something. "I understand," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know." The call ended, and I sat there, processing everything that had just happened. Part of me had expected this moment, had longed for it. But the other part of me, the part that had grown, the part that had finally realized her worth, knew that this wasn't the defining moment of my life anymore. The defining moment had already passed. It had come when I had stopped needing his approval. When I had started living for myself. I took a deep breath and stood up, looking out the window at the city below. The rain had stopped, and the world seemed quieter now. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone to tell me I was enough. "I've made it," I whispered to myself, a quiet smile forming on my lips. "And I don't need anyone's approval to know that." As I stood there, the weight of everything I had gone through, everything I had overcome, seemed to fall away. I had done it. Not for him. Not for anyone else. But for me. And in that moment, I knew that the journey had truly come full circle. I had finally become the person I was always meant to be.